Hey everybody, this is Ghost with Blades and Blasters, coming with another character generation video. This one's for Star Trek Adventures 2D20. This is a system that was published by Modifius. Let me go ahead and bring up the credits page here so you can see everybody who's involved in this in case you want to pause the video and take a look at it. That is all here. It is a 2D20 system. We have played it before. If you look at our USS Dharma campaign that involved, I think it ended with me, Tetnak, Ian Wolf, and Sim as the main characters. Very good system, very fun system, very rewarding. A lot of tension that can come from this, with it being 2D20, using the momentum and threat, and a lot of memorable experiences that we had for it. I'm going to go through character generation of any kind of mechanics questions or any kind of mechanics concerns about looking it over. I recommend watching those old videos, as Zypher does a great job, especially in the maiden session, of explaining everything so that we're aware going forward as players what we need to do. I'm going to go ahead and go over character generation, of course. It shows here your three common eras, that being Enterprise, TOS, and TNG. You can see here what centuries those cover. Enterprise being early exploration, original series being Captain Kirk and that area, and then Picard being in 24th century with all that's between there, TNG between Nemesis and everything like that. I'm not going to go too much into that. I'm going to mainly go into characters. You've got player characters, which obviously that's your PCs, those are the main characters, and some of them have supporting characters as well. So you have your main character which you play that are normally senior staff, are very important, and they're in multiple scenes. But you've also got supporting characters which are controlled by the players in certain situations as is needed. And then of course you have NPCs as well. I'll be going through things in light in order to explain their mechanical stuff, but again, for any kind of mechanical questions, I recommend either asking us in the comments or looking at the maiden session for USS Dharma, or just watching the series in general, to be honest, because we go over a lot of stuff in that, and it's all pretty well explained. Again, it's run by Zypher. I think it's the Adventures of the USS Dharma, but it is the USS Dharma Star Trek 2D20 Modifius playlist that we have. That said, I'm going to continue here. So everything's run by attributes in this setting, as with any kind of RPG. They're not immediately familiar, but if you hear about them, you'll know. So you've got control, daring, fitness, insight, presence, and reason. You have got control, which has to do with obviously maintaining self-control, mentally, emotionally, and physically. You've got daring, which has to do with having the guts to make a decision, or quick reflexes to boldly go if we're going to pull something from the setting. Acting without a plan in some circumstances, just taking the initiative. Fitness has to do with your conditioning and well-being, and how well you endure hardship. Insight is emotional intelligence, understanding feelings, people, ideas, things like that, being self-aware. Presence has to do with your charisma, or the impact, the influence that you have on other things because of the power of your personality. And then reason is the sciences, being logical, meticulous, things like that. You got your disciplines, which have to do with your Starfleet aptitudes. Everybody starts with one. In all of these, because to be in Starfleet you have to have basic proficiency with everything on a starship. In the event you got to fill in for somebody. I should also state before going further that all characters start with 7 in the attributes, primary attributes, before we even get started. So that's prior to character generation. You will have a 7 in all your attributes and a 1 in all your disciplines. Disciplines are command, which that's self-explanatory, leadership positions, being able to have good interpersonal skills, negotiating, things like that. Con, which is how to handle ground vehicles and shuttles, starships, navigation, things like that. Engineering is self-explanatory, maintaining technology, understanding, repairing, inventing. Security, again, straightforward, observing and watching out for threats, maintaining order, and being useful in combat. Science is not only hard science, but also theoretical scientific method. Medicine is having understanding of the physical and mental makeup of life forms, as it says here, and medical uses, surgeries, things like that. Then you have focuses within your disciplines, and these are things that you're particularly good at within each discipline. So, like, if you're a doctor, you might have trauma, surgery, and emergency medicine, things like that, providing immediate assistance. And then you've got talents that are sort of like perks that have impacts depending on what disciplines you have or what the situation is. So I did pre-build a character for this one. But I will go through everything as if I had not. I'm going to try this out as I feel it saves some time in the recording process, and I want to be mindful of your guys' time for these, as opposed to actively clicking through and finding things as we're going along, not having to put breaks in the recording, things like that. So I chose so choosing the character species. There are several options in this book. There is another expansion as well that has that information. God, this song is loud. Give me one moment. I appreciate it for the background music, but we gotta be mindful here. I think I turned it down a bit. Good. So choose a species. I'm going to go with base human. Keep it simple. With humans, you have access to 2 particular talents, Resolute and Spirit of Discovery, both very good relative to the human spirit. And then you have a trait of humanity, which is kind of how they are. And then lastly, you have attribute bonuses to each of your attributes, increasing them by 1 each. When I did this initially, what I increased was my insight, reason, and control. Reason being because as a doctor, I want to be more in control of my actions, be able to apply surgeries and be able to apply a steady hand to surgeries and things like that without obviously cutting up whoever my the object of my operation was, whatever the subject was. That makes it sound like I'm experimenting, but I digress. So I did that, I applied that, and then also as a talent, I chose Spirit of Discovery, which, as you will see here, is very powerful for a group ability. You can use your determination to add points to the group momentum pool, and this helps other people accomplish actions, perhaps in a situation where they'd be better suited to use momentum than you. For example, if I'm a doctor, a medic, and I'm handling something that's more minor, like fixing up somebody who's been injured, it may be more important that somebody has momentum for their action in the scene if they need to fix something or we all die. So can be something useful to consider, some action that you do that provides this momentum. Maybe you fix the person who needs to fix the thing, and that's how you provide them the momentum going forward. But it's something interesting I think is available for a talent, and I plan on using that in this episode. I'm making this character for an episodic that Tetnack is running, by the way, in case you're wondering where I pre-built and then I'm talking about it now. It's another reason. So for this, you would go to step 2, where the environment that you're from. Now, I like to roll for things like this because in real life you don't get to choose this, so why should your character get to? So I rolled for this and I got Busy Colony. This is being born outside of Earth. It's at one of the older or more prosperous colonies that's around. They are fiercely independent, and they have a sense of pride for their environment, what they've done to accomplish that. You gain a single value. It should reflect the environment and culture we were raised within. I chose we must coexist to survive because, again, we're fiercely independent. We didn't get much aid from the home world. We had to work together to make it. Now, for an older colony, maybe that's not true, but whatever colony that I'm from, that's the case. We had to do a lot of things on our own, and we did not rely on the home world to save us. So we have to coexist to survive. And this doesn't apply to us all in the starship. That applies to everybody in the universe. And that's kind of the approach that he's going to take. He's going to be very altruist, and we should all work together within reason. Choose one of the following attributes and increase it by 1. I believe I chose presence because I didn't want him to be super daring. Presence seemed more important at that time, as sort of a bedside manner situation. And then discipline, command, security, or science. Command has to do with negotiation and talking to people, so I figured that was a good discipline to go into as well. The next thing would be upbringing. This is kind of how your surroundings were impacting you, and this is an interesting one because you can choose to embrace or rebel against it, and it shapes how you are. So the first thing that I did as I rolled for this one again, I got business or trade. Now, with me being kind of an altruist and caring about people around me, maybe what my backstory will be is that my family was a bit shady and perhaps were not the best kind of people to deal with. They were very much about profit. He's not Ferengi, but you don't have to be Ferengi to be greedy. Attribute-wise, I rebelled against this upbringing, and I tried to form my own identity away from a cosmopolitan, ambitious lifestyle. I thought it was too tacky, in my opinion, and increased my insight by 2 and reason by 1. And then the experiences I did learn from them, I bumped my command by 1 again because I felt again I'm interacting with people. This is an interaction-based business. Obviously, you interact with people, trade, business. This is what you do now. And then I chose negotiation as my focus because I learned from hearing my parents, hearing people talk, to learn about how to work with people on prices and things like that. Even though they might not have done it the best way, I learned that the impact that words can have with changing what people think they need and whatnot, and just try to use my vocabulary. So Starfleet Academy, this is an option I chose because I felt like this is where you can begin to choose what happens to you. This is one you can obviously choose. Obviously you have aptitudes, but if you work for something, you can work into that field. So I chose the sciences track. I kind of wanted to be a doctor because I was reviewing everything with the characters playing in this right now, and a lot of people are in security, econ, and engineering, but I don't see much science. So I figured why not be a scientist and a doctor, primarily a doctor. So again, the value that I chose was first do no harm, meaning that he probably prefers non-violent situations to violent ones when it comes to resolving conflict, which has to play into a negotiation as well, kind of. But it makes sense with Hippocratic Oath and everything like that. I'm sure it still exists at this point. It may have been replaced by something more sci-fi, but it's still pretty important to go off that as a basis. Attributes, you can gain 3 attribute points, which can be split among 2 attributes or 3. Increase 1 by 2, another by 1, or all 3 by plus 1. I believe I increased reason, insight, and control again. And I believe insight at that point was pretty high up there, at 11 where it is right now. So you can pick those attributes freely. Then I chose either science or medicine. I chose medicine, increased it by 2, and then increased 2 other disciplines by 1, since they were my minors. The ones I increased by 1 were science and engineering. And then I selected 3 focuses related to my chosen track. They were all related to my chosen track. They were emergency medicine, trauma surgery, and infectious diseases. Because if you're going to go out into the great wide beyond, you better know how to deal with horrible, disgusting things that happen to you and the crew. So that's what I did with that. And then I gained another talent. The other talent that I chose, and I'll say Sphere Discovery is my first one, but I chose field medicine. Which field medicine allows me to not take a penalty when I'm working without the tools I would usually need for a job, which it can be very penalizing in some cases depending on what you're doing. So basically I just MacGyver a medical situation and make it work, at least for that time period that we had to deal with it. He's a young officer, so he would receive a value that reflects the experience in some way. We can still save them. This is something that I felt makes sense because my character is boundless and enthusiastic that he can save anybody. That's not always the case. Some people were just doomed in this universe. So, and then you receive untapped potential as a free talent, which is, again, that's something you just get. It's not really it's kind of a boon-bane situation. You can't increase attributes higher than 11 or have any discipline above 4 when you're a young officer. But you do roll, a die, a challenge die, to see if you get bonus momentum. If you spend a momentum, do a momentum spend with dice. You can see this mechanic in full effect in our maiden session for this, as well as the follow-up one, and how it exactly works. It can be good and bad, because you can get momentum for yourself and your other characters and really just roll out momentum and be able to spend it. But you also provide threat to the GM. The threat for the GM allowing them to introduce complications or new circumstances in your environment, which is fun, but it can be very challenging if you continue to give a lot of threat to the GM with this role. So a lot of young officers, you will be in a lot of dangerous situations as a young officer in a campaign, because you will be giving a lot of extra threat when you make momentum spends. But I think it's important to have a fun session, is to allow the GM a lot of flexibility with that threat. Next, we got career events. I rolled for these because these are things that happen that, again, I don't think you should have any control over. I rolled Ship Destroyed and Learns New Language. So Ship Destroyed, I increased Daring by 1. my security understanding by 1, and then I choose the focus between extravehicular operations, small craft, or survival. Obviously, there are other ones that could apply, but I felt survival made the most sense. Maybe they survived on the planet after they evacuated the ship when it was being destroyed. And that's kind of how it went down. And then 15 was learns new language. I communicated with an unusual species and learned to communicate with them. Increased my insight by 1, which put it at 12, so I could not keep that point. I had to redistribute it somewhere. I redistributed it into presence whenever we were all said and done. And then because you can't have more than 11 as a young officer, so in any kind of attribute. So I had to redistribute it as per the rules. And then I gained new knowledge, new understanding, increased my science by 1. Did so. Now it's at 3. And then I gained a focus, which has to do with what I learned. Linguistics, cultural studies, or negotiations. I already had negotiations, or negotiation. So I picked linguistics because that made sense why I would learn more about how to communicate with in the future by learning about that unusual method of communication. So, let's see. Then you have finishing touches. At the end, you choose a final value. The final one that I chose based on my experiences was I'll not lose another ship. Basically, if I have to be in a situation where what I do is dependent on us getting through, like not losing the ship, if I can rationalize that's what in my mind I would feel, then that's a good value to have, and maybe it's a traumatic experience that I had to live through. Attributes, again, because of untapped potential, I can't have any above 11. I had 1 above 11, and I had to redistribute that point to presence, which made it 9. And then I got 2 more attribute spends. I had control at 9 and presence at 9, so I just bumped them both to 10. I think this is pretty good for a caring doctor. Good insight, good reason, presence, and control. Maybe not the most fit or daring individual, but I've got some capability there. And then disciplines. You can't have any discipline above 5 and cannot have more than 1 at 5. Again, untapped potential decreases this max amount, so it's the same thing as that, but I can't have anything above 4 and only can have 1 at 4. So I had 4 medicine, and I believe I had 4 medicine, 3 command, 2 and 2 here. So 2 science, 2 engineering. I just bumped science and engineering because I think those made the most sense. Engineering because I got to keep my workstation in order and maybe do that to alleviate some of the burden from the other engineering staff. And then science because if I'm studying diseases or things like that, I might come into contact with scientific stuff. Because again, you get to bump 2 disciplines and 2 attributes by 1 at the end of everything. And then final details. I added up and checked all these. These are all accurate. I will adjust this. I'll adjust personal details and everything else whenever I get to that point of creating and finishing up the character bio. But that's basically character generation for Star Trek 2D20 Adventures, or Star Trek Adventures in 2D20. Again, for any mechanics questions, it can definitely be answered by viewing the USS Dharma series, especially the beginning episodes, as we learn the game more later on, so I have to ask any questions with it. But you can also ask some questions in the comments below. If you have any requests for character builds or anything like that, or any questions about the character generation, we can definitely go over it in more detail, and I'll be happy to answer questions. I should put these in. But other than that, that's pretty much everything on my end here for now. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and wish you a good rest of your day. Take care. Bye.